Hello and welcome to the Hard Questions. I'm Solomon Serwanja. We dedicate this episode to Uganda's tourism sector. Today, I'm really excited to be hosting Amos Wekesa, CEO of the Great Lakes Safaris and CEO of Uganda Lodges. He's also an tourism enthusiast. Everywhere he has gone, he has marketed Uganda. I see him putting on Uganda everywhere, in airports, everywhere, meetings, call it. Amos Wekesa, thank you so much for accepting to be on the show today, and I'm humbled to have you today.
I hope I can add value, Siranja, but I'm very proud of what you're doing.
Thank you.
I really enjoy your ability to question people. I think you understand your game.
Thank you very much, Amos. I'm humbled. Let's talk about a subject that you really love,
Yeah.
and that is tourism. Where are we as a country in terms of our tourism sector? Can you give us perhaps a comprehensive overview of where we are as a country?
Well, I think to help us understand the idea of tourism. Of course, tourism is from the word tourist. A tourist is a person who lives place A, goes to place B, spends over 24 hours but less than a year, but must not have a permanent job in place B. That's a tourist. So whoever is listening has actually been a tourist. Seranja, you have been a tourist many times. So if you live here and go to Masaka, which is not your home, and you also don't have a permanent job there, you're actually a tourist. So the money you spend calling Amos and telling me, oh, I'm going to Masaka, that money is counted under tourism. When you go to a petrol station and take fuel to start going to Masaka, that money is counted as an earning from a domestic tourist. When you stop along the route and eat on your first chicken, that money is counted as tourism money. When you sleep in a hotel in Masaka, that money is counted as tourism. That's what tourism is all about. Yeah. So a lot of people don't understand that they've been tourists. They also don't understand that the amount of money they spend elsewhere actually creates a commercial value in the place where you spend. Now, of course, tourism is a subject that has the highest trickle-down effect of any economy because it supports manufacturing, it supports agriculture, it supports entertainment, it supports sports. That's what tourism does. That's why when you go to countries like the UK, their tourism and sports are in the same docket because they work in tandem. They support each other. So when we sit here and shout Arsenal, we are actually adding on the value of the docket of the tourism and sports docket in the UK. Tourism and sports docket in the UK, for example, is targeting to earn $250 billion by 2025. Billion pounds, not billion dollars. Those are much more than dollars. So yeah. About 300 something billion dollars. That's what they're targeting by 2025. Now, Uganda is extremely very gifted, and history is on our side. Uganda was a top tourism destination until 1971 in East and Central Africa. Even just the management of hospitality, Uganda was the top in East and Central Africa. The reason why Uganda was top in hospitality management is because we had Uganda hotels. And so we had Uganda hotels, but we also had Ginger Training School. Uganda hotels were the grooming grounds. So in 1971, the majority of our top hospitality managers actually fled to the exile. A lot of them went to Kenya. They're the ones who started the Kenya's tourism.
They were Ugandans.
They were Ugandans, 1971. So the Karang Frank, what's his name? The father of guy who used to work at NBS, tall guy, my friend, Marcus. So Marcus actually grew up in Kenya, but the father was in hospitality. He was one of the leaders in Kenya's hospitality, the Dumbas, the Who's. That is our history. Now, Uganda was not just, it was also a target of the British. Their prime minister came and traveled around Africa. He went back and said, out of all our assets, there is nowhere where too little can take you too far. And he said it's a garden from the south to the north, from the west to the east. That's what he was talking about Uganda. He called it the Pearl of Africa. Because he saw its beauty. He rode a bicycle from Fort Portal until Kampala. And he was mesmerized by that whole beauty of this country. And that's when he went to the US, to UK, he said, concentrate upon Uganda. It is the Pearl of Africa. I have been across Africa, but there's no country like Uganda. But that had been informed by history. The first people to come to Uganda, the British, were many researchers, and the researchers were former soldiers. Former soldiers were hard enough. If you hear people like John speak, those were soldiers who had been transformed into researchers. The first group that came to Uganda were researchers. They came to research. The English took 200 years to come and looking for the source of the Nile, for example. And in 1862, that's when the Speke found the source of the Nile in Uganda, which the Basogas already knew. So the second group that came, when the Spekes of this world came, they found that Ugandans had a loyalty to their kings. And it was extremely very difficult to penetrate Ugandans because they had a very strong loyalty to their chiefs and kings. So they brought the second group of people were missionaries. So they came to talk about the King of Kings. The Bible can be used for good, but it can also be used for bad. So they're talking about how being poor and going to heaven was such a great thing. Yet they were living in lavish as priests at the time. That was to cool Ugandans. So towards the end of the 18th century, the other group that came was a commercial group. That's when they started in the late 18th to start constructing what they called the Uganda Railway. It was never the East African Railway, it was actually Uganda Railway. The reason why it was the Uganda Railway, I think it reached Jinja in 1927, 22nd, about that time. And the reason was because Jinja and Busoga and Bunyoli were the ones that were powering the spin industry in the UK. It was the cotton that actually brought the guys. And then in 1956, they extended the railway to Kilembe, so to get both the gold and the copper from Kilembe. So that's how important Uganda was. So now, before British Airways was called British Airways, it was called the British Overseas Airline Corporation. So the British had 6 major cities as a focus in Africa. Those was Alexandria for the access to the sea, right?
That's in Egypt.
In Egypt. And then Cairo for the aviation. In South Africa, they had Durban for the port and Johannesburg for aviation. In Uganda, they had 2 cities, 2 places. They had Entebbe and Uganda, but they also had Soroti. The reason they had Soroti is because British Overseas Airline Corporation used to train their pilots in Soroti. That's how important it was. But Uganda was very, very well placed in the heart of Africa. 4 hours to Cairo, 4 hours to Johannesburg, 1.5 hours to Mombasa, 1.5 hours to the major parts of Congo. Then the other factor, Entebbe was such an important place. In fact, by 1945, 1950, the biggest airport in Africa was Entebbe. Now, the reason why it was because of its strategic positioning. So the lowest point in the region was generally Dar es Salaam, which is 56 meters above sea. But Entebbe is about 1,300 meters high, lower than Nairobi, which is 1,400 something, and then Kigali. Now, when a plane is taking off at a lower altitude, it spends less fuel. But also, the other factor that made Entebbe very unique, beyond its strategic positioning. Uganda is very strategically positioning. Of course, was the positioning, then was the altitude, but also the safety bit of it. When you're landing, before landing there was water, and after taking off there was water. Those were major 3 factors that determined them focusing on Entebbe and made it the biggest airport on the African continent. But all this was based on research that was done in the 18th centuries. The Caucasians have a long game. They're not like us. They play a long game. When Amos is talking today about Uganda lodges, he should be talking about 5 generations from here. That's why you go to Britain and you
find a house which is
1,000 years
old. I know.
Still
and
in
it's
the same family.
Yeah, and it's still looking good.
They think in that direction. For us, we're short-term thinkers. Our leaders are short-term thinkers. Us, we're short-term thinkers. We're thinking 5 years of election. Those guys are thinking long time ago. Do you know that the construction of the London Tube was done in 1890s? London was
the
empty.
Central Line, the Piccadillys.
Yes, and actually Piccadilly was the first place where it landed. Yes, you should read the history.
18.
It was 1890s, 1892, I think, when they started building that rail. I think the first trip was, I think, in 1808 or something like that. That was fantastic. They thought about, imagine London without the underground.
It's chaotic.
Now, we are producing...
I mean, even when they go on strike,
yes,
the guys who do the underground.
Yes, we're producing between 1.3 to 1.5 million new Ugandans every single year. But there's no single Ugandan, including the president of Uganda, thinking about what is going to happen to these children in 100 years. Where the opposition doesn't talk about it. We're not thinking. But these guys in 1890, they thought about doing a rail underground that will be used today. Are you saying that? So you can't compete such groups of people. You can never grow when you don't think in that direction. So anyway.
Wow.
So for Uganda's case, that made us outstanding. Mason Falls National Park was the #1 national park in Africa. In fact, when the Kenyans used to market, they used to say, first go and enjoy Mason Falls because it was #1. Then come to the Maras and have fun. And you know, there was a route, you know, there was a lot of connection between the Egyptians and Uganda. You know that through Emini Pasha. If you read that whole story, Becca, you know. So there used to be cruises from Egypt
along the Nile.
Yes. Then they had a bus that would go just alongside Aswa Dam. Then they would sail, come to Nimule. There are falls there, waterfalls in South Sudan. Then they would get on the cross and end the steamer ship into Masindi, into Putiaba port. And the first hotel to be constructed in Uganda was what? 1926. That was Masindi Hotel, the first Uganda to be constructed in Uganda. So they used to come, enjoy Mason Falls National Park, and then stay in Masindi Hotel. And then from Masindi, they would then get on the boat to Masindi Port. On Masindi Port, to take them to Namasagali. There was a ship from Masindi Port, a steamer ship that used to take them to Namasagali. In Namasagali, they would get on a train to come to Kampala and enjoy life. That's how it was. They would have sent their cars from Britain to arrive in Mombasa. And they put those cars on the rail to Uganda. And they start enjoying themselves. You know, thinking.
Wow.
This is the country we're talking about. So in Obote 1 asked his brother called Nechon and said, I want you to create an export-based strategy. And that export strategy, they came up with a triple T and triple C. So triple T was tobacco, was tourism, and was tea, but tourism was at the center stage. It's out of the triple T that Uganda hotels were formed.
Yeah.
From Obote 1. It was purely an export-based strategy. Then triple C was cotton, copper, and coffee. Do you know that in the early 60s, the world prices of Arabica were determined in Bugisu? Yes, the world prices were determined in Bugisu. That's how well it is. By 1960s, Uganda, if you look at things like cotton, we had an office in Germany, we had an office in the UK, and we had an office in the US. Now, farmers will not just grow cotton. They would go grow cotton based on the orders the British would offer. They would say, in the next season, we want 50 tons of cotton. Then the Germans say, we want 100 tons of cotton. Then the Americans. So then the farmers would farm based on the demand.
Asese would open fields.
Yeah, absolutely. By 1971, Uganda used to spend, you should ask an old man called Otoa. He was a former chairman of Uganda Tourism Board. He was a young man representing us in Bonn, in Germany at the time. Uganda used to use $1 million in 1971. $1 million is equivalent to $100 million probably today to market Uganda in Germany for tourism. That is how it is. Today, you speak to these older people about positioning the country. They don't get it. That's the reason why we were so admirable. The cooperative movements were formed, were strengthened because of the formation of an export-based strategy. They were so good that countries like South Korea in 1966 sent researchers to understudy our cooperative movement. 1966. These are things that Ugandans don't get a chance to learn and study. Eh?
The Bugisu Cooperative Union bought assets in London.
Yes, they did. They did. They used to determine the world prices of coffee, man. Arabica coffee specifically, not Robusta. Eh? So for us, history is on our side. Eh? History is on our side. These cruises on Lake Victoria, if you've seen some videos on cruises on Lake Victoria, man, those guys used to come and have fun. Lake Victoria here alone, I think research by World Bank shows that if Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania were serious in the utilization of Lake Victoria, would earn about $63 billion a year through tourism, transport, and fishing.
Can you imagine?
And the Ugandan bit of Lake Victoria is a fantastic bit. It's got a group of islands called the Sessa Islands, 84 in number.
Yeah.
It's got a group of islands called the Kome Islands. It's got a group of islands called the Buvuma Islands, 53 in number. And I've been to about, probably when I was a guide, I went to about 50 of those islands. If you go to an island like Buvuma is the second largest among the 84 Sessa Islands. You have a waterfalls, you have a river on it, you have trees that fell on White Sand Beach many years ago, just rotting on that island. It's the second largest. So the largest island is called Bugala. That's where you find the headquarters of Kalangala. Kalangala is a composition of a number of islands. So this is Kalangala district, formed of a number of islands. Well, these are basic things that probably Ugandans don't get. But, like I said...
You talked about the boat cruises, and I remember how Egypt is taking advantage of the Nile. You know, the boat cruises in Cairo and having dinner and just sailing, and you pay, $300.
Yeah, but you see...
On the Nile.
But you I think Uganda... I think our biggest problem is that God over-gifted us and entered the heads of us as a population, the leaders. We're all sleeping because we can eat. We don't think. We just want to drive the latest cars, things that don't make sense. You know what I'm talking about? Our focus is not a bigger focus, not a bigger picture focus. Because the population can eat. Uganda has got 48.9% of East Africa's arable land. 85% of Uganda's land is actually arable. Even the 15% can actually be made to be arable. Kenya has got less than 30% of their land arable. But that's a whole bigger country. Anyway, so I believe that the good conditions are a problem. If you look at just an example you've given, according to WTTC, World Tourism and Travel Council, Egypt makes about $16 to $17 billion. But other schools of thought say about $22 billion a year from tourism. But over $5 billion is attributed to the Nile. But Egypt has got one level on top of the Nile. We've got the source. The English took 200 years looking for that source. We've got the best rafting opportunities in terms of 1 to 3 days in the world. Do you know why? Because in many rivers around the world, they have high waters for 6 months and extremely low waters for another 6 months. But in Uganda, the Nile, the difference between the highest season and the lowest season of the flow of the Nile is only 1 meter. So it makes you raft the Nile across throughout the year. So there's no place like that. And then you've got the most powerful waterfalls in the world. In Uganda, on the Nile. The whole of the Nile, struggling to pass through 6 meters, falling 43 meters deep, cascading over an area of about 120 meters long. There's nowhere in the world you find water gushing through a canyon like that. It's actually, it's a bragging right. So when I brag about Uganda, I'm not just bragging about this. So if Egypt makes over $5 billion, $5 billion is about 18 trillion. Our annual budget as a country is 49.2 trillion shillings, right? Out of 49.2 trillion, Uganda can only through taxes raise about 25 trillion. Now, 49.2 trillion, 60% of it is what they call the recurrent costs, where we pay workers. That means as a country, we cannot raise enough taxes to pay just salaries and buy those cars. Then the next 18% is paying interest on loans. Now, just the Nile alone should be able to pay our national budget if we were serious. Positioning the Nile. But how do you explain this to leaders?
That's where I was going to come in. Amos, where you've built for me the historical background, how people were serious and market. Where did we get it wrong? Where did all that stop? You know?
I think it's about leadership.
What happened?
I think it's about leadership. And when I say leadership, I'm not just talking about NRM. I'm talking about even opposition. How many times do you hear this discussion, this deep discussion on TV by either opposition or government guys? How many times? Do they understand these figures? Do they even understand Uganda? These are things we need to question ourselves. Of course, you, the media, also play a big role. If I was listening to you hold Twitter spaces for Uganda Airlines, I was extremely very impressed by how you articulated this. Now, I can bet that going forward, you are going to be interviewing people with clear knowledge on how to position this country. I was actually very impressed. So if we can get more of you interviewing leaders with proper background knowledge, then we will succeed. If we don't, we will not succeed. Because leaders act on the sentiments of the population. The population thinking is actually determined by how much the media puts out there. When we talk about the Nile, we've talked about Lake Victoria, the weather, or would they win sea? We take it for granted. If you look at Visa International does research every single year. What factors determine people traveling? Because people use Visa cards for traveling and MasterCard, right? So they're interested to understand what is the reason they are using to use their cards. You get it? Between 34 to 36% every single year say they're traveling because they're looking for good weather. And Uganda has got averagely the best weather in the world. Even when we are crossed by the equator, the lowest point in Uganda is 622 meters high. The highest point is 5,109 meters high. That's Margarita. So where we're sitting here, we have about 1,000 meters. So if we were about, say, 50 meters above sea level with the equator, it would be extremely humid. But we have averagely the best weather in the world, 28 degrees. So the only country in the world that can come close to us is Ecuador, because we lie along the same altitude. So if 36% of the people traveling around the world, let me give you examples. WTTC, World Tourism and Travel Council, started in Kuala Lumpur last year, September. And they say the projections for this year, earnings from tourism, is going to be $8.9 trillion. By the next 10 years, which is 2032, 2033, the world will be earning about $16 to $17 trillion from tourism. Are we getting that? It's the fastest growing industry in the world. Now, as Uganda, we should be saying, if in this year the world is going to earn 8.9 trillion and we have good weather, our target should just be $5 billion from tourism or $12 billion from tourism. Get it? We've got 53.9% of the population of the mountain gorillas. We've got a mountain ranges called the Rwenzori Ranges. They are among the top 8 most beautiful mountains according to National Geographic in the world, and the only one in Africa actually mentioned. That mountain range called the Rwenzoris, have 16 peaks, have 16 mountains. Those 16 mountains, 5 of which are actually among the top 10 highest points on the African continent. 5 on one mountain range. But of course, there's nothing that can describe the challenge that you go through to go to the top, because the most technical mountain on the continent, Kili, you just walk. But how much does Kili make? People that summit Kili about 65,000 a year. When they say summit, it's the people who go to the top. But what about the guys who go lower? So I think you might get over 100,000 people. But I can tell you that last year, how many people climbed the Rwenzoris? There were less than 3,000. But because of the Rwenzori marathon that we're running, the numbers have gone from 2,000 to 7,000. Now, Kilimanjaro, which is famous for only having the highest point, but not as beautiful as the Rwenzoris, still makes Tanzania about $350 million a year. Okay. The Rwenzoris are a $1 billion potential sitting there. If we marketed it, that's what we would earn as a country from only the Rwenzori, $1 billion a year. As a country, but we're not serious, of course. You've got the world's largest caldera, mountain caldera, a hole formed out of volcanic activities on the mountain. It's Mount Elgon, world's largest caldera. If you look at the national park like Chivali National Park. It's 795 square kilometers. It's believed to be the highest, it's believed to be the world capital of primates. That means there's nowhere in the world you find a concentration of primates like you find in Chivali National Park. You can do this research and find for yourself. Now, the biggest attraction, of course, it's got 13 species of primates.
Black and white,
which are
colobus
nocturnal,
monkeys,
the chimpanzees,
the
and so on.
chimpanzees.
So 4 are nocturnal, and 9 are diurnal. They're active during the day, the nocturnal are active during the night. The garacos and the bush babies, all those are active during the night. So you go to a place like Queen Elizabeth National Park, it's what? About 1,980 square kilometers, according to some schools of thought. That national park has got 660 different species of birds. That's the highest concentration of birds per square kilometer compared to any protected area in the world. It's a bragging right.
With all these things, Amos, why aren't we taking advantage of the opportunities that come with them?
I think it's ignorance of what we can do with it on the side of leadership, whether ruling or not ruling. Because I can't believe if the opposition guys stood up and started talking this sense we're talking, the government would do something. If the government also decided to do, they would actually do it. But it's going to take long until we get people that actually understand how to take advantage. Maybe they may change, but I don't see it. Because I've spent about 15 years advocating. Seranja, you guys have given me the platforms. You're still giving me the platforms today. I've spoken about these things. But I've spoken to everybody. Why don't they listen? Why don't they listen? We're just politicking, 5 years politicking. You can never grow a country politicking because, let me tell you, in every 5 years in tourism, we work 2.5 years. A year after election is dead. That's why sometimes I think maybe with these politicians, whoever becomes the president, we should give them 10 years so that we have at least a gap of 7 years to work. And they make their stupid noise, you know? Because this is a poor country. You cannot continue. You finish an election, you start politicking again. You can't survive on politicking. When you're producing between 1.3 million people to 1.5 million people, you have to be very serious as a country. When you're having over 600,000 children graduating from tertiary institutions and universities, competing for less than 20,000 jobs, you're in trouble. You have to think. You have to think. You have to go beyond talking. You have to go beyond politics and actually act. But we're not talking politics. I'm not a politician, but I feel hurt as someone that understands how this country can actually be well positioned for business.
So what can we do then?
I don't know. Maybe we continue talking. I don't know. Maybe somebody will listen. I have no idea.
When you look at how government takes the tourism
But I must
sector
also
very
say,
seriously,
before you come in actually, I must say that the only person I'm seeing trying to actually think in the right direction is Audric now. He's talking business, he's understanding, he's now traveling, he's being exposed to that particular knowledge. It's probably the only person I see who is talking about things that Uganda must do.
with all these things, you know, Amos, you've talked about the potential that we have, and yet we don't see a lot of seriousness. Do you think that what can we do moving forward to actually market our country more? I know that they established the Uganda Tourism Board. I know that there are all these things that government is doing. But what more can we do as a country to earn from this resource? Like, we have gold, but we don't know we have it.
But when I say Ranger first, I think we need to think long-term first. What do I mean? We need to go back to schools and examine Ugandan kids on what the value of Lake Victoria means to Uganda. What the value of the Nile means to Uganda. Having fertile soils, what does it mean to Uganda? Having good weather, what does it mean to Uganda? Children must be, almost 30% of their examination should be based on what our attributes can do to our country. Because we study about the prairies, the rainlands, but because we study foreign, everything foreign looks better than what we have. But why am I putting on Uganda everywhere I go to? It's because I believe in it. I understand it. I have seen tourists wondering how anybody can be so poor in such a beautiful country. Because they come from countries where they struggle. The soils only work for 6 months in a year. The weather is very moody. Yeah? You have summer, you have winter, you have spring, you've got... So you have to prepare for all that nonsense. This is what I'm talking about. They're not like us. We have it all. So in that education. Number two, I think the president must take serious a few areas, like Uganda Export Promotion, Uganda Investment Board, Uganda Tourism Board, must be taken serious. Have the right people push the right agenda. You push. You know what I'm talking about? Given the right resources, people should be given targets. There must be performance targets. You think that in Rwanda you joke around? Every 21 days, the president of Rwanda must know where you are appearing positively. Eh? Look at a country called Uganda. Look at Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania. Uganda is the only country among these countries, even other countries, that has no direct flight to any European city. Even Turkish has to go through Rwanda before it comes to Uganda. KLM has to go through Rwanda because it comes to Uganda. SN Brussels has to go through another country before it comes to Uganda. Kenya, out of Nairobi, every single day are 3 flights into London. 2 flights by Kenya Airways.
Every single day?
Every day, full.
Plus BA.
Plus BA. There are flights to France. 2 flights every day to Amsterdam. KLM, 1 flight. Kenya Airways, 1 flight. Many flights. As a country, we do not have a clear indication that there's any tourists who come from Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Sweden, Norway, Finland. All these countries send tourists to Kenya. They send tourists to Tanzania. We have not single target. A country has no single flight out of a Chinese city. A country has no single flight out of an American city. And if you want to know a country is a progressive country, it must be involved in what they call international business. A country that's involved in 2 international business are 2 major indicators. The number of chains of hotels, now we have what? About 4. Marriott is coming up, Hilton is coming up in Nakasero. You've got Sheraton, 4 points. Yeah. So you actually have like 4 brands. Kenya, how many brands are there? By the end of this year, they'll have 80 international chains of hotels. We don't have a Radisson here. Even Rwanda has more chains of international hotels than Uganda. Masai Mara alone, which is a very small national park, has got close to 5,000 rooms. All our 10 national parks and travel game reserves combined have got less than 1,500 rooms inside them. Combined. Masai Mara alone has 12 airstrips serving it. 12 airstrips. Masai Mara gets 300,000 tourists a year. That is the same number of the tourists that account in Uganda. When UA says in 2022 we got 380,000 tourists, many of them are counted 3 times. So when Amos brings a tourist and goes to Queen Elizabeth, it's counted as a different tourist. When he goes to Chibala, it's counted as a different tourist. When he goes to Murchison, it's counted as a different tourist. So when they give you a target of a number of 380,000, so we're talking about maybe 220,000 as a whole country. So we cannot compete with one national park in Kenya called Masai Mara as a country. Mombasa, we've got 1 airport. This 1 airport has, this year probably what, about 1 million passengers? We only compete with Mombasa, which handles about 1.3 million passengers. Jomo Kenyatta is doing between 8 and 10 million passengers a year. So if you don't have enough numbers of arrivals at the airport, you're not involved in international business. We're not. You forget these statistics by Minister of Finance. It's total nonsense. Just look at the airport. Those statistics from World Bank. Our statistics must come from mass. We must see common sense. Are you seeing me?
Let's talk about those 2 things in detail. Finally, after 10 years of advocacy, Uganda Airlines was reborn. They're now opening up different routes. They now fly to Mogadishu. They now fly to Mombasa, Nairobi. Their latest is Mumbai and Lagos. What do you make of it?
First of all, the setting up of a national carrier is not necessarily a business. It's actually called an infrastructure. When you have a flight that is taking you, and this is something I want to explain to Ugandans. If I'm a British, I have 196 countries as options for me to travel to. But if I have had and seen Uganda through positioning, which we're not, because our highest amount of tourists last year from anything outside Africa was Britain. We had 13,000. Kenya had over 210,000. Yeah, that's how bad it was. We had 3,200 last year, 3,200 Germans. South Africa had 450,000. Namibia had 160,000. See what I'm talking about?
When you do the numbers, they're frustrating.
They're very frustrating. So, but when I'm a British, and I've thought about Uganda as a destination, or Costa Rica, wherever it is, the second thing that comes to my mind is connectivity. If I am going to go through Dubai or wherever, spend 8 hours before I come to your country, I would prefer a country where I have a direct flight. That's why you have more British in Kenya than you will have in Uganda. Now, after I have seen the direct flight, the other one is the ease with which I get a visa. So if it's hard for me to get a visa to come to your country, chances of me coming are very minimal. So in our minds, we have to be thinking in that direction. We must be brilliant enough to think in that direction.
How can we support people with the visa processing?
Absolutely.
And also improve our infrastructure, which you said?
Absolutely. So the setup of Uganda Airlines was a fantastic idea. And I must say that I've traveled with them. The in-flight service is really good. We've got very good pilots as well. You can tell good pilots. I've flown around the world. I fly more than 15 times a year. I think I'm very impressed by that. But that's not enough. What I still see is the total lack of understanding of marketing. Yeah? And I've given these examples probably in a private chat with you. That Kenya Airways, as I said it earlier on, Kenya Airways started flying to New York in September 2018, right? But they opened an office to market that flight in New York, Nairobi, in 2013. By the time the flight started, they had already marketed it. So when you don't do the marketing, like for example, Uganda is going to be flying to Mumbai this week. It's going to come back empty. It is not going to take any cargo. That's for sure. But the Indians, according to your statistics that you mentioned actually, that India made $695 million from Uganda.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a positioning mindset, you hear India has made 1.5 billion from Uganda or 2 billion. Using Uganda Airlines
infrastructure.
Because we have no thought. Before you go to Mumbai, you should have marketed Uganda in Mumbai. You should have marketed Uganda in the whole of India, brought top influencers. You know, this flight should be coming back with top Indian influencers. It should be bringing...
Because we have a huge Indian community.
TVs, yes. You know, flying Ugandans to Kenya, to Mombasa, does not add value to Uganda's economy. It actually just gives us alternative. Instead of someone flying with another alternative airline, he has left the money in it. But they're spending extra money in the economy. Uganda airline flying to Mombasa has actually increased the business for Mombasa. Ugandans are wedding in Mombasa. Indian Beach cannot survive without Ugandans. Every weekend there are weddings, people are struggling. Flights are full to Mombasa.
So the little that the country gets is just the air tickets.
Absolutely. Now you think about the statistics for last year. Uganda became the second most important tourism source for Kenya's market. Because of Uganda Airlines, partly. Yeah? 220,000 Ugandans went to Kenya, spending an average of $2,000. Spend over $400 million in the Kenyan economy as tourists. From a poor country, removing even the small money to another economy, isn't it? A much richer economy. Uganda, I think, as an economy, can probably compete with only Mombasa. If you look at really statistics, you've got cruises there. You've got so many airlines flying into Nairobi, into Mombasa. Do you know how many flights are between Nairobi every morning? Direct flights to Mombasa. There are 55 in a day. Uganda, Kenya is our biggest trading partner, but the flights between Uganda and Kenya in a week are 78. You call a civil aviation and tell us, because you see, if you can't quantify things,
my goodness,
you don't understand what you're dealing with.
Wow.
Are you seeing what I'm talking about? So we should be waking up. That means there's more business between Mombasa and Nairobi than Uganda and Kenya. Are we together? Yeah, that's what it simply means. But anyway, so
you were talking about the aspect of marketing the country where we are opening up these routes.
Yes. Where Uganda Airline goes, the focus should be on two things. One is, how do you get Nigerians coming into Uganda? Two, how do you get our products into the Nigerian market? That is the only thing that can save the country. Not saying, Wekesa wants to go to Nigeria and you're opening a route for him. No, You're moving money from a poor economy to Africa's largest economy. Those Africa's largest economy must bring the money here. Yeah.
And it takes marketing in Lagos.
Absolutely. You must have a clear marketing strategy in Lagos. You must have a clear marketing strategy in Kenya. Let me tell you, if the Kenyans knew how wonderful our nightlife is, the Nile is, our pineapples, our food, every weekend, every Friday would have, and I've told this Uganda Airlines, we would have 10 flights on a Friday from Kenya, just shipping Kenyans to Uganda, and Sunday, 10 flights shipping them back.
Let's look at the opportunity that just befell us. We're going to be hosting AFCON.
Yeah.
Are you excited? Are you looking at this as it an opportunity for us to cash in the dollars? And do you think Uganda is getting aggressively prepared?
I think first of all, we must appreciate the efforts there for government to getting AFCON. The problem is that it's only one thing and then we sit down and sleep. So if you compare to our neighbors, say Rwanda, they're going to be hosting the World Championship for cycling. For the first time in Africa, it's happening in Rwanda in 2025. They're pushing for Formula One. They're pushing for basket, you've seen, basketball. Their conference hall is booked until 2025. With meetings.
Kigali convention.
Yes, every day is booked until 2025. That convention alone is collecting about, I think, $110 million this year, probably. Just money paid to that conference hall. Forget about the impact in the large economy, which is a much more money.
The hotels, food.
Yeah. You know that has made it has forced Kenya to. You've heard of the bombers of Kenya?
Yes.
The cabinet sat a month ago and decided they're going to put up the biggest conference hall in Africa, and they're going to put 5-star hotels in the Boma. They already have so many 5-star hotels. That is pressure from Rwanda.
I also heard they are constructing, they are remodeling the stadiums.
Yes.
Kasarani and the
Yes.
rest.
They don't have better stadiums. Tanzania has better stadiums. But they're building 2 brand new stadiums.
Yes.
Now, much as
Sitting about 65,000.
I actually commend what the team did. But this should inspire us to go for many conferences, many meetings, many events. That's what I'm talking about. It should inspire us to go and bid for many other things that are important around the world as we create the infrastructure. But we're going to be sitting back talking AFCON until 2025. But it will still has value. The number one value is the image in which it will create for Uganda. The second value, it will improve on infrastructure for sporting in the country. The other value is that it may position our players for international buying. The other one is actually spent on the ground by tourists. But we're in a boat with very aggressive countries. You've seen Tanzania, even the president herself is behind marketing.
Yeah.
Even Kenya now.
Yeah, I've seen
You've
Kenya.
seen the
Ruto
president,
doing
he's there in
everything he
Masai
can.
Mara.
He's in-
Those guys
They've even done a promo, an advert.
for AFCON already.
Yeah, they've done an advert. Kenya welcomes you with Ruto himself.
For AFCON.
Yeah.
What? Now?
Yeah.
Now, let me tell you that those funds are not going to come here out of emotion. We must put millions of dollars, and we must first of all understand the figures. We go to South Sudan and say 10,000 people follow a player who plays for Senegal. And then we go there and market to those people, put in resources and say, by the way, he will be playing in Nambole on these dates. You must be in Uganda. You go to Nigeria and say, those Nigerians watch Mali team. Mali team will be playing in Arua. You start telling them our nightlife is good, our national parks are good, our food is good,
Stage a show, I don't know, get a big artist.
Yes, bring those influencers. But every single year, telling guys in 2027, Uganda should be the place for you to think about. But until you have that...
So that they don't go...
Yes!
Because there are 3 countries.
But Kenya is going to take them. The other thing is that we're also very good. We're very bad with each other. When I want to fight Serwanja for his success, I am very aggressive. But when I'm going to compete with Kenya, I say, we're East Africans. No! Kenya, first of all, it was good for us to go as East Africa. We got the cow. Yeah. Now, Kenya is going to go for the most hefty beat. And let's not fear to fight for that space. We need to fight and get the right people.
But it requires strategic thinking and positioning.
Yes, but I hope that we can think in that direction. But we have engaged Magogo, we've engaged the Minister of Transport, of Sports. They seem to understand. I hope they effect it. They've been very recipient in ideas. We must say that I was on TV with them yesterday, so I understand that, that they're thinking. But what is going to happen in Uganda is we're going to concentrate on infrastructure and forget the positioning of the country.
And it's very important.
And yet that comes number one. You can put up infrastructure. And the problem in Uganda is that we do not know how the world works. So when we bring in people here, instead of them spending in our economy, where do you go and find a country where I have come in as an international delegate and they're spending money on me? I travel all the time. I arrive at the airport, I find my way, I pay my accommodation, I pay my... That's how economies grow. For here, we want to spend on those people. No. Everyone coming here must spend the dollar here. We must tell Ugandans, you're selling chapati, you'll earn. You're selling borders, you'll earn. Your transport, you'll earn. You have a restaurant, you'll earn.
Lodges.
We should also make sure that entering in Uganda with a visa becomes very easy. That airlines where you fly, Kenya, where Uganda Airlines flies, we make sure they fly on Uganda Airlines to Uganda. But we must start a strategy now, implementing it now. We are last-minute people. That's why we are poor.
Amos, where do we go from here?
I hope we can distribute this information that we have done. Actually, should make a lot of different videos out of this. And we start sharing so that people start learning. Maybe we'll have some impact out of this stuff. If you cannot get it, it might probably convict someone from Minister of Finance. And I think also as you're interviewing people, get the Minister of Finance and ask him, why don't they think in this direction? Interview them. Put them on the spot. Why are they in those ministries when they cannot help the country? Why are we even poor? I think the environment must be created that these brains can then be utilized for the good of the country.
Wow. Amos Wekesa, thank you very much for speaking to us.
Thank you.
It was quite a detailed, emotional, mixed, everything wake-up call with Amos Wekesa, tourism giant, CEO of the Great Lake Safaris and Uganda Lodges. As we celebrate independence, this is something to really munch on and remind ourselves of what has changed, from the history that Amos has told us, where we are now and perhaps where we're going, what really has changed. That's a question for you and me. I'm Solomon Serwanja, and this is The Hard Questions.